Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1 hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. And my guest this evening is J.D. Chandler. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling fine.
Good. And I'm feeling fine, a little nervous because I've never talked to you before. And I'm always nervous when I have a guest, and it takes a couple of minutes and then I calm down.
Okay.
And I'm at peace as you are right now, apparently.
Okay. Well, I'm working on being calm.
I read a little about what you sent me about who you are and gone to your website, and it's very impressive. You
Thank you.
spent a lot of years doing this work that you're doing right now.
I have.
As you know, the show is in 2 major segments. The first segment is where I talk to you about who you are, called the bio segment.
Right.
And the second half is where we talk about your writings and what you've been doing now that has you worthy of coming on my show.
Okay.
So let's start off with who you are. If I were to ask your best friend, how would your best friend address you? JD, or is there a first name? Or?
John. I go by John with my friends. I write under the name of JD.
Oh, John, yeah. And if I were to ask your best friend, who is John? What would your best friend say? John is what?
Well, I think probably the best way to describe me would be I'm an artist. I want to get my experience across to people. And
Is that what your best friend would say about you? He's talking about John?
I think so.
You said it in the first person.
Okay, then I'll say it.
And that's
okay.
a trick.
Okay, I see what you're saying. No, I think she would say John's an artist.
Yeah.
I work in a lot of different media. John works in a lot of different media to get his experience across. I painted, draw, sculpture. I write music and songs. I play harmonica. Writing is probably my strongest art.
Are you going to illustrate those?
I have my
facets
harmonica.
of you. Yeah, you do? For God's sakes.
I don't know.
It's going to be a great hour.
It's going to take some coaxing to get me to play, but we'll see.
All right. And the title of the show is as you can tell, I'm pretty well organized here. Criminal historian J.D. Chandler on Portland's local history. Portland's local history has fascinated you for some time.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I have some information you sent to me, and who am I? Willamette Week called my hidden history of Portland a locally focused people's history in the vein of Howard Zinn. That's saying a lot.
I was very pleased to be compared to Zinn.
Portland Mercury called me Portland's most obsessive criminal historian. Is that true?
I have met someone who's a little more obsessive than me, and we're writing a new book together. But yeah, I think I probably am guilty of that.
I'm proud of both, you said. I have dedicated the last 19 years to researching and writing the history of crime in Portland. Why the history of crime in Portland?
Well, I got interested in murder several years ago. A friend of mine was murdered in Seattle. And I realized that the effect that his death had on me and his family and all of the people involved was a lot bigger than just the murder of one person. In fact, in a murder, the victim is sometimes the lucky one because they don't have to deal with all of the things that come from it.
Sure.
But the killer's life is ruined. The family and everyone who knows the killer, the family and everyone who knew the victim, in a lot of ways, the life is ruined. And it was really a kind of an eye-opening thing for me to go through that. And then when I came to Portland a few years later, I came back to Portland because this is my home. But in '96, I came back, took a job with a local union. And I stayed in a downtown hotel and had an experience there that was a little bit scary and very weird. And it made me want to know more about what had happened in that hotel. And so I started spending my Sundays down at the Central Library reading the old Oregonian newspapers. I finally did find out what happened at that hotel. It's on my blog. But that's what got me going. And I've been focused on crime ever since then, because it took me probably 3 years to find the crime that had happened in that hotel. And by the time I got there, I had so much information on murder in Portland that it didn't make sense to stop. And plus, it's fascinating. It's really interesting stuff.
And what happened as a result of your investigation? Did they go back and bring the perpetrator in?
No. What it was is I went into this hotel room, and I had a experience where a couple of things in the room gave me a very strong feeling of dread. And I knew that something bad had happened in that room. And I found it. A woman was beat to death there. In 1968. It's on my blog, Slabtown Chronicle. It's a blog post called Don't Look Too Close. Mm-hmm. It's probably one of the worst domestic violence cases that I've ever heard of.
And you think that there's something there?
Something was left in that room.
And you detected it?
I felt it. Yeah. I don't know that I even believe in ghosts, but I did feel very strongly that something bad had happened in that room, and then confirmed it.
Well, some of those kinds of things, I'm not too sure. I'm a recovering Catholic,
Okay.
So I know about superstitions.
Right.
I'm an atheist now, an agnostic, one of those things you can call me. Well, my history is often focused on murder and other crime. It is not solely about that. I work in a variety of media, writing books, blog spots, posts, and songs and musical drama, films and podcasts. Do you ever sleep?
A little, sometimes.
Yeah. I had another thing. J.D. Chandler is a former political labor activist and currently a public historian specializing in the history of crime in Portland. During the last 16 years, he has been making a study of murder in Portland and compiling the Slabtown chronology. Up to this time, his work has been published online through his Slabtown Chronicle blog, www.portlandcrime.blogspot.com. He has been writing fiction and nonfiction his whole life, but in the last few years, criminal history has been his main focus. He currently blogs on Portland's Weird History. Yes. On his Weird Portland blog, www.weirdportland.blogspot.com. That's fascinating. What do you find weird about Portland?
Well, what Weird Portland is about is the odd stories from history that don't get told. I'm particularly interested in African American history, women's history, gay history, the history that's been overlooked by historians, because I think it gives us a better look at what life was like. As my friend Shirley says, studying history is it's like a collage. And you need to have a bunch of different stories so that you can understand it in a holistic way. So I try to find the stories from Portland history that have not been told before, or if they have been told, they haven't been fully told. For example, and I love to find characters that have been forgotten from Portland history, such as Thelma Johnson Street, who was a graduate of Washington High School and the first African-American artist to sell a painting to the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. She was a Portland girl.
You've done your research.
I love her. If I could get in a time machine and go back to 1939, I'd go to one of her performances, because she was also a dancer. And she, in fact, the blog post about her is called Dancing for Freedom. That's what she said she was doing.
Wow. Let me see if I can continue with some of the notes you gave me. Making a living from writing, you said, I'm not that smart. I think you are that smart to do all the things you're doing, yeah. There will be a lot less of it if I have to live in a tent on the sidewalk.
You're reading from my Patreon.com website. Yeah.
If I die of starvation or not being able to afford my meds.
Yeah.
You wrote about it. Is that something to talk about? Your meds?
Yeah. Well, I do definitely have cardiac issues.
Okay.
So yeah, I do take medications for that.
No psychotropic kind?
No, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But this is from my website, at patreon.com, where people can support my work. Because I do work part-time, but it takes a lot of time and energy to do the history that I do. There's an incredible amount of research that's involved. And I spend probably 90% of my waking time on reading old Oregonian newspapers. They're all online, police files, just whatever I can find on the particular issue that I'm interested in. And so it doesn't leave me time to earn money in other ways. I make a little money from my books. I work part-time, but it's true. I won't be able to do as much of this if I have to live in a tent on the sidewalk.
What do you do part-time to bring in a few bucks?
I work at PCC. I administer a test center at Willow Creek campus. So basically, I watch people take tests.
Okay. It helps, huh?
Oh, yeah.
And you follow your passion with these things.
Yes.
Oh, man. Now, how am I going to fit these in? I don't have enough time now.
Okay.
But I'm so curious because they're so attractive. And as we get into the second half of the show particularly, I'll hold these up and you can talk about what goes on in there. But let me continue on with the basic bio stuff. And I may ask you a question or two that you don't care to answer, and that's okay, too.
Okay. All right.
And if I sound kind of disrespectful, yell at me and I'll apologize and clean up my act.
Okay, I try not to yell.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Eugene.
Eugene?
Yep. 54 years ago.
54 years ago?
Yep.
Why were you born?
Why was I born? That's a question I never could get a good answer on. So I don't know. I've asked it all my life.
Trick question, my favorite one. Yeah.
But I've never got a good answer on that.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you.
Mm-hmm. I was born to do what I'm doing, to be kind to people, and to enjoy my existence, and coming back to being kind to people across the board.
That's pretty good. That's the best answer I've ever got.
But I've been practicing all these years, so don't ask me anything else because I'm not that pat on it, all right? Yeah. Is there anything significant about your cultural or national or racial heritage worth
That's an interesting
repeating?
question. I come from, it's interesting, I come from old American settlers, both in the North and South, who married immigrant families. So a very mixed background, although it turns out it's mostly English. I come from some crazy religious people on both sides of the family. One group of ancestors were Mormons who came to Missouri to be with Joseph Smith before he died, and then went to Utah with Brigham Young. And on the other side, I come from a family of a plantation owning family in Virginia and Georgia and on into Texas. So they owned slaves on that side of the family. So just a very odd American background. I don't know that there's anything really that important about it. I don't know that I really believe in being white. I think white is something that people have made up. If I had to say, are you white or are you non-white, I would have to probably admit that I'm white, although I don't really know anybody who is white. I don't think people really
This is going to be a good hour out there, I promise you, folks. A religious preference, did you have one before, or do you have one now?
Oh, that's a good question. I was semi-raised in the Assembly of God, kind of Baptist tradition. We went to different churches when I was a kid. I remember forcing my dad to take me to church. My dad was not a churchgoer, but I was as a child, and I was very interested in it. And so I went to the Baptist church then, and later on to an Assembly of God church. And I was a very strong Christian up until about the age of 13 or 14, when I kind of came awake to what the world was really about and how much more was out there. And I guess I don't think I really have a religious preference now. I'm a skeptical, spiritual person.
What's spiritual? What does that mean?
I believe that there is a force of love in the universe. Maybe it's the creator, but there is a force of love in the universe that kind of guides us and can help us make better decisions in our lives. I think what it comes back to is what you were talking about, being kind to other people. And I don't believe in a God that pulls strings and answers prayers, but I do believe that there is power in focusing your mind that way.
You think about a spiritual experience that you can tell me about?
Interesting. Well, as a very young man, about 12 or 13 years old, I felt the Spirit move me in an Assembly of God church, and I went up and accepted Jesus as my Savior. That was probably the most significant spiritual experience in my life.
How did it feel?
It felt very exciting. It felt, it was a very physical feeling in my body. It made me get up and walk to the front of the church. But the more I think about what it was, I think it had more to do with the crowd of people that I was in than with any outside thing. Because it was what I had been told I should feel,
Yeah.
and I felt it. Go figure.
Are you looking forward to your next one like that?
If I have a moving spiritual experience like that, that might be exciting. It might be scary. I am a big fan of the writer Philip K. Dick. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was a science fiction writer in the 60s and 70s. And he had a major spiritual experience in his 50s that changed his life completely. And I don't know that it really changed things for the better for him. He thought he was going crazy, and I think most of the people who knew him thought he was going crazy too. But what had really happened is he had a spiritual epiphany and realized some things that people didn't like. So I don't know. I don't think spiritual experiences are all they're cracked up to be. I'm not really hoping for another one.
And if my guess seems that interesting enough in those kinds of regards, then I'll broach the topic to see what I'm getting.
Okay.
Because I'm still exploring and considering what the hell that really means, you know?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So you practice a religion now, or you're a-religious for the most part?
A-religious for the most part.
And your formal education?
I have a bachelor's degree from the Evergreen State College in Spanish and Latin American Studies.
You're bilingual?
Yes. I spoke Russian when I was in the Army as well. And
Really?
I also speak a little German. I lived in Germany for a few years and picked up the language when I was there.
You studied Russian?
I studied Russian at Defense Language Institute, yes. I was very fluent in it about 35 years ago. I don't really speak Russian anymore.
This is when you were in the military?
Yes.
And when were you in the military?
I went in 1980 and I got out in 84.
84. What do you remember about being in the military? Was it a good experience, or bad, or what?
In a lot of ways, it was a good experience for me. I am not a conformist.
Really?
I don't do well in a situation where I need to conform really strongly to a pattern, and that's all the Army seemed to be interested in. They wanted me because I was intelligent, I could learn Russian very quickly, I was an intelligence analyst, and I had a real talent for spotting patterns and putting things together. So I was valuable to the Army, but it was not the place for me. There were a lot of good things. I traveled. I saw a lot of the United States. I saw a lot of Europe. I learned languages. In fact, it was in the Army that I learned that I could learn languages, because I had studied Spanish in junior high and high school and hadn't really learned it, hadn't really known that I could speak a language until I went to DLI, and the Army taught me that I could learn Russian and I could be fluent in it. So good things and bad things. It was not a completely good experience for me. At one point, I refused a promotion, and I spent the last year of my time in the Army pretty much being punished for not getting a promotion.
Rebel, huh?
Yeah, I was a rebel, yeah. My daughter was born while I was in the Army, though, so that was a very good thing for me in my life. So good things and bad things.
Where'd you get your IQ from?
Born with it.
Yeah? Mom or dad or both?
Well, my dad was not a very educated man, but he was a very sharp, very shrewd man, and he loved to argue. And he taught me to think critically and to speak accurately and to win arguments. So I credit a lot of my intelligence to my dad.
How's your relationship with the local police department? I'm coming from all angles here. Is that okay?
Yeah, this is great. Spotty. I have friends. I have friends on the police department, and I have a lot of ex-cop friends. But there are some people who are not happy with the history that I write.
Sure.
I think that anybody who's really interested in the history of the Portland Police Bureau needs to know about the bad parts of Portland history.
Of course.
Because our police bureau has not always been a good force. It hasn't been good for anybody in this town in a lot of ways. I think we have the best police department that we have ever had now. And, you know, I like police officers.
Sure.
I didn't know that that was true because I kind of grew up not liking them and being afraid of them. But that was because I lived part of my life in LA.
That explains a lot.
They teach you that down there, definitely. But the officers that I know, they did their work for good reasons. People don't become cops for no reason. They have a good reason for doing it, and it usually is a very good reason. Now, things change. You know, if you're working in a corrupt system, corruption happens. You know, people abuse power. You know, it can happen to anybody. But people go into police work for good reasons, and I like the people who do.
Yeah.
I don't agree with them all very much politically. But
I make it a point when I'm in a supermarket or some public place like that, and I run into a bunch of policemen together, or firemen even, the two of them, I make it a point to go up and say, thank you for the job you do for us.
they do a good job.
And they really appreciate it, you know.
Yeah.
That's in case they stop me for a speeding ticket. No.
And it is good to have that, definitely.
You know, but that's how I feel about them, you know. It's a hell of a job. I wouldn't want it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of my police friends are ex-police.
Yeah, and did you ever have a regular job earning a salary?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
What'd you do then?
Well, if you don't mind,
Please, of course, anytime.
my bio in the
anytime
back
you want to.
my bio in the back of Hidden History lists my jobs. J.D. Chandler lives and works in Portland, Oregon. At one time or another, he has worked as a busboy, waiter, door-to-door salesman, laborer, landscaper, soldier, intelligence analyst, Russian linguist, bellboy, insurance salesman, telephone solicitor, apartment manager, newspaper deliverer, political activist, campaign fundraiser, executive director, in-home caregiver, union organizer, Spanish interpreter, temp, truck driver, account executive, admissions rep, tutor, freelance writer, and GED examiner, which is my latest one.
Again, when did you ever sleep?
That took a long time to do all those jobs.
Of course. You enjoy each one, probably.
In different ways, yeah. Some of them I didn't like so much, some of them I liked a lot. I really enjoyed being a political activist and a union organizer.
Yeah.
It was very hard on my health.
I was a union steward in 2 or 3 instances in the past. I was an aircraft mechanic.
Yeah,
and,
well then you
drove a
understand.
milk truck and then drove a yellow cab for a while. I was doing 3 jobs at one time because I had 5 little kids to raise. And
When
so
did
I've
you
been all
sleep?
over the place like you. Finally went back to school and got my doctorate in clinical psychology.
Yeah.
That's the way I ended up.
And I'll tell you, probably the one I enjoyed the most,
What?
I liked driving a truck. I drove a delivery truck around Portland delivering water for a spring out by Mount Hood. And so I drove all around the Portland metro area delivering water to grocery stores and restaurants. And I enjoyed it. It kept me in good shape. I was lifting weights every morning, loading my truck, lifting weights all day, unloading my truck, and I didn't have to think too much, just drive around and drop stuff off. It was great.
Funny, I think about when I was in my teens and what did I aspire to. It was a Depression era in New Orleans, but born in 1928, in the Ninth Ward, and, outhouse, all that kind of stuff. And my aspiration was to eventually be a big truck driver.
Ah, there you go.
That's as far as my ambition went before I went out into the world and learned there's more to expect from life.
Yeah.
But that called back an old memory, and it's kind of a secret that I appreciate reliving. You know?
Well, there's a lot of satisfaction in doing just a physical job that doesn't take. You can use your mind on other things and do the physical work. There's a lot of joy in physical work.
Which of all those things that you did at that time that you appreciated the most?
At the time I was doing it,
Yeah.
my favorite job that I've ever had that I enjoyed almost from the minute I started to the minute I stopped, the last part of it wasn't the best because things had changed, but was as account executive at New Horizons Computer Training Center. Mm-hmm. I loved it. We had a really good group of people working there. We had an excellent boss, and I was able to help people change their careers because I had a career program that we did there. So people who were doing all different kinds of jobs could come to us and learn the skills and get the certifications to become IT network administrators. This was in the the first decade of the 21st century. So I started there in 2001. So there were a lot of opportunities for network administrators, and the pay was good. And I still have friends that I helped change their career 15 years ago now. But they keep in touch with me, I keep in touch with them because we created a real bond, and they changed their lives really for the better. So I enjoyed that a lot.
Now you've confounded me because I make a guesstimate as to what the IQ is of my guests. And now you got me off the deep end because we don't go beyond 5 standard deviations above the mean.
I have no idea about IQ.
That's a compliment. Yeah. What else can I ask you before we take a break, then get to the meat of this subject here? Would you characterize yourself politically as a left, right, a Tea Party, or what?
I would have to admit to being a leftist.
Yay!
I was a Central America peace activist after I got out of the Army. So yeah, it's my passion. Before I went in the Army, I was an anti-nuclear activist. Okay. We went to we kept the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant closed through the 70s. And that was partly my doing. I was just a 17-year-old snot-nosed kid, but I was there.
Yeah, any persons from the past or alive today that bring you fond memories that you admire, look up to? Any names come to mind?
Oh, well, we just lost one. Julian Bond was someone that I really admired. I remembered him, I remember seeing him on TV when I was a kid and just being fascinated because he was such a smooth speaking man and so intelligent. And I hadn't thought about him in years, but seeing that he'd passed away and seeing the pictures of him and the memories, I thought, oh yeah, we really lost somebody there. Yeah. So yeah, that just came to me the other day.
I didn't know you were such a beautiful human being.
I try.
I see myself in you, if I may. And Julian Bond, anybody else come to mind that you look up or admire?
Oh, yeah. Some of the people from Portland's history. Dr. Marie Equi is someone that I really admire and really, I think I identify with. Although someone called me on this the other day because I'm an old political activist. Yeah. You know, I have been arrested for my political beliefs, and I have organized demonstrations, and I've marched for things, and I've done all of those things, and so I know what that's like. And now I'm old and tired. I still believe in all of those things, but I'm not going to go get arrested unless there's a really good reason for that. Sure. And I'm not going to go march in the street for something unless there's a really, really good reason for it, because I don't have the energy anymore. But I do have the experience, and I do have the study, because I've made a study of civil disobedience and political protest, because it is one of my big interests, and it's a big part of what Hidden History of Portland's about. And someone called me on my admiration of Dr. Equi because she was a violent, confrontational protester. Her most famous protest is when they were clearing the Wobblies off the street in 1913 and being very brutal about it, and she screamed at the police. She screamed and lectured all the way to the police station. They threw her out of the police station, and she went back in to continue yelling at them. They thought she was crazy. They were going to lock her up in an insane asylum, but she was angry. And so someone said, well, I was criticizing an angry demonstrator who I really didn't think was accomplishing what they wanted to accomplish. And my friend said to me, well, I wonder what you'd think about Dr. Equi's tactics. And I said, I think Dr. Equi's tactics were violent, needlessly violent and confrontational, and I think she hurt the causes that she worked on because she used those. But that doesn't take away my admiration of her. She was a doctor, not the first, but one of the first to graduate from University of Oregon Medical School, a woman. She graduated in 1905. Dr. Lovejoy graduated in 1903, so she was of that early women doctor wave. She was an abortionist. She was an open lesbian. She was very vocally opposing of the power system here in Portland and very supportive of workers' rights. She did a lot of organizing with the unemployed. She spent time she spent almost 2 years in San Quentin prison for opposing the First World War, and she became a prison activist after that. As an older, she had heart disease like I do, which I kind of think of as the political activist disease. It makes sense to me that we would have heart disease.
Of course.
But as an older woman, she didn't have the energy to do what she did, what she had done. But in 1934, when the police Red Squad issued a list of dangerous radicals in Portland and her name wasn't on it, she called the police chief and threatened to sue the police bureau if they didn't add her name to the list. That is someone that I admire.
Okay. We're about to stop and take a break here so that we can go into the other part of this program. And you're a delight to hang out with.
Yeah, it's fun, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Reed, take a break here, and the mics are going to be off for a couple of minutes. Okay, we're back. And thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like you and like my guest here, J.D. Chandler, who's very interesting. I mean, really enjoying him so far. And we're going to enjoy him some more in the second half of the show. So let's continue, and you can lead off in the second half.
Okay.
Talk about what you want to talk about, and I'll respond to you. Okay.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about the project that I'm working on now.
Please.
Writing a new book with Teresa Griffin Kennedy, and it comes out of Portland on the Take, which was my last book that I wrote with J.B. Fisher.
Shall we show this?
Sure, that would be great.
Portland on the Take.
Portland on the Take is about organized crime and the corruption in the city government in the 30s and the 40s, early 50s. And in it, J.B. Fisher and I looked at a couple of old murders, the Joanne Dewey murder case in Vancouver in 1950, and then 2 murders that had gone unsolved in Portland in 1948. We had found the detective files of Multnomah County detective who had worked on those cases, and as we went through his files and started doing the research on this book, we realized that he'd solved the cases, that he knew who the killers were, but that his investigation had been suppressed. And so in the book, we bring forth the solution to these 2 murders, and we connect them to the Joanne Dewey case. So while I was doing that research, I had already known about the Torso murder, which occurred in 1946. And what the Torso murder is, starting in April and running through October, people found packages of body parts in the Willamette River.
In the river?
In the river, floating in the river. And there were 4 or 5 packages, and they contained different pieces of the body. They finally found the head in October, but they never were able to identify the woman.
But the Willamette River dumps into the Columbia River.
Yes.
Because this show is seen all over the world.
Oh, okay,
yes.
yeah. But they never identified the body, never identified the victim. So it's one of Portland's oldest and coldest cases. Nobody has ever really thought that the case could be solved. But while I was doing my research on this book, I mentioned the Torso case, but I came across a character who been forgotten in Portland history for a long time, really a fascinating character. Her name's Anna Schrader, and she disappeared in March 1946. There's no record of her after March of 1946. Actually, there's no record of her after her husband died in 1941. It's the last time we see anything about her. So I mentioned in the book, odd coincidence that this woman who was so interesting and so hated by the police bureau disappeared right before the body parts started being found. So as I finished up the book, I contacted Teresa, who's a friend of mine and also a really talented researcher. And I said, Teresa, can you look at Anna Schrader and see what you can find about her? I gave her everything that I had and asked her to take it a little further, and asked her to, and I told her about my idea about the torso murder case. So she contacted the Clackamas County Sheriff's Department, and they had reopened the case. We still don't know why they reopened the case, but they did reopen it in 2004. Doesn't seem to be any new evidence. In fact, all of the evidence is missing now. It's
2004.
It's all gone. But he shared the investigative file with her, so she got all the information on the torso case. And she went through all of that, did her research on Anna Schrader, and she's convinced that Anna Schrader is the torso murder victim. If Anna Schrader is the victim, it gives us a very good idea of who would have killed her, because there were very specific people in Portland who hated Anna Schrader, and I'll tell you who she was. She was a private detective who worked for the mayor's secret police. The mayor's secret police was a group of people who went undercover into speakeasies and drinking establishments and gathered evidence so that the police could, raid those establishments. The reason that she worked as a private detective is she had a long-term affair, about 8 years, with Lieutenant William Bruning on the police bureau. So her working for the police bureau was kind of cover for this affair. In 1929, their relationship broke down, became kind of violent, and broke into a huge scandal, one of the biggest sex scandals of the 20s. And there were actually several sex scandals at that time.
You discovered all this in your research.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the big sex scandal, and she was painted as crazy. Bruning, Police Chief Jenkins, all of these people were basically spreading rumors about her that she was nuts. You can't really listen to her. And so she became really, really angry. And she decided to expose everything that she knew about the illegal activity of the police department, legal activity of the mayor. She ran 2 recall elections, or she was involved in 2 recall elections against Mayor Baker in 1930 and 32. She ran for mayor in 1932. She testified to grand juries. She was involved in several different court cases. She was a major figure in Portland in the early 30s, and what she was talking about was police corruption. She knew that the police department was controlling the distribution of illegal liquor. She knew it for a fact because she'd been involved with it. She knew that the police bureau was framing people for liquor offenses and sometimes for murder. She knew about it because she was involved in it. But the smear campaign against her had worked pretty well, and nobody paid a whole lot of attention to her. She had some
Because she's nuts.
Because she's nuts. She had some hardcore followers who stuck with her and almost recalled the mayor in 1932. He didn't get recalled, but came really close, and he decided not to run for re-election because he could see it wasn't going to happen. But then she became very quiet. In 1934, she withdrew from public life, and we really don't hear about her again until her husband died in 1941. So there's a lot of questions about who she was and why she did the things that she did, and why she disappeared in March of 1946. And so Teresa and her husband, Don Dupay, who's an ex-Portland police officer, he wrote the book Behind the Badge in River City, which is a great memoir about being a cop in Portland in the 60s and 70s. Excellent book. But he and Teresa and J.B. Fisher, my co-author on Portland on the Take, and Poetry Sherelle, I work with her as a songwriter. I usually write lyrics, she writes music. We have been doing a podcast called Murder by Experts, and part of that podcast is telling the story of Anna Schrader and the torso murder case and how they come together. So actually it's been kind of exciting and very interesting way to do it. So I love working with radio, and telling the story in kind of a mysterious, serialized way has been really a lot of fun. So
Sounds like it.
And now the new book is coming out in February from History Press, and it will have all the information about Anna Schrader and some kind of a conclusion. I don't know if we're going to actually say that we've solved the case, but we're going to present a very viable scenario of what could have happened. And I'm pretty convinced that it's her.
When will the book come out?
It'll come out February 2016.
It's already got a date, huh?
Yep. Now we just have to finish writing it.
Interesting. So those are the kinds of things that you look into to get some truth.
Yeah. And I have always been, because of my experience with my friend being murdered, and I've actually, I don't know if it's karma or what it is, but I seem to attract people to me who have had experience with murder. Partly it's because I understand it and I'm willing to listen, and I understand. I understand the PTSD that can come from that. Mm-hmm. I had a relationship with a woman who was a survivor of murder. Her husband tried to kill her and she survived it, but it was a horrible trauma for her. But that's usually where my stories start, is with a murder. Mm-hmm. Not all of them. Hidden history. A couple murders sneak in here by accident, but it's really not murder related.
So what is hidden history about?
Hidden history is about the Portland that people don't know. What happened was, I originally wrote Murder and Mayhem in Portland for the History Press, which is my history of Portland in murders. And when I got done with it, I realized I have a bunch of stories that didn't fit in the book, and I have enough for another book here. And that's when I wrote Hidden History, and I also started my Weird Portland blog to kind of bring out the stories that didn't fit anywhere else. So I talk about, well, here's a good one right here. The 24th Infantry, stationed at Fort Vancouver. It was a Buffalo Soldier unit.
Yes.
I don't know that a lot of people know this, but we had a unit of black soldiers. They led the Preparedness Day parade in Vancouver. They marched at the head of the parade in 1899. But they spent about a year there. They made a really strong connection with Portland, and a lot of the veterans of that unit, when they got back, because they fought in the Philippines insurrection after they were in Vancouver. But when they came back, a lot of them came back and settled in Portland, and were a really strong influence on Portland's African-American community. It's stories like that. Stories about Joe Hill, the famous labor organizer who wrote the songs and then was framed for murder in Utah and executed by the state of Utah. He came to Portland to introduce his song, The Preacher and the Slave, one of his most famous protest songs, played it for the first time in Lounsdale Square in 1910. So those are the kind of things that I'm interested in, and obviously a lot of people are, because Hidden History sells better than any of my books now. I'm most proud of this book too, because they use it at Madison High School to teach their local history class. And I had I don't know if you saw it on my website, but I had a great experience with that class this year, because the teacher asked me, he told me they're using my book, asked me to come in and speak to the class, and so I did. And those kids were surprised, because I didn't come in to tell them stories about history. I came in to tell them what historians do. So I did that, and they really liked it. They really got a lot out of that, and they asked me to take them on a field trip and show them Portland.
Really?
And I'm always glad to do things like that. So I took them to Lone Fir Cemetery, and it's my favorite cemetery in town.
Lone Fir Cemetery, what part of it?
It's in southeast Portland. It's over at 20th and Morrison. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of very interesting people that are buried in there, so I took them around and I showed them the graves of these people. In the meantime, between the time that I spoke to the class and the time that I took them to Lone Fir, I discovered that Portland's first black firefighter was buried out there, but he didn't have a headstone. And I do volunteer work with the Oregon Black Pioneers. I'm the grave specialist. So when we find out about an African-American person buried somewhere in Oregon, it's my job to figure out who they were and say something about their life. And so when I found out that Gus Waterford was buried out there, and he'd been Portland's first black firefighter, also Portland's first black postal worker, I thought, he needs to have a headstone. So while I was taking the kids around, I showed them where his mother was buried and where he's buried, and just empty grass. And I challenged them to put a stone on the grave. And they did. About 5 of the kids took it on as a end-of-year project, and they contacted the Fire Bureau, and they contacted Multnomah County and Metro and all the people, and they found out that they had to have someone from the Waterford family to approve it. So they did the whole genealogy, and they found some cousins that live up in Canada, and got in touch with the family, got permission. They got the Retired Firefighters Bureau put up some money. The Friends of Lone Fir put up some money. And it was June. I think it was in June when they did it. But it was a big event because there's actually a firefighters cemetery there at Lone Fir. And 12 of the firefighters who were on the Dave Campbell Memorial, who died in the line of duty, are buried there within about 100 yards of each other. And so they were all getting new stones, so they put a new stone on Gus Waterford's grave at the same time. It's incredible. It's really exciting to go over there and see the stone that wasn't there just a few months ago, and to know where it came from. I was very proud of those kids.
Of course. Didn't ask you about marriage or children.
I have a child. I have a daughter. She's 31 years old next week. Mm-hmm. She lives up in Washington. I was married for a while. I've been divorced since 1989.
Mm-hmm. You're single now?
Yeah.
Okay. Enough of that. It's been so long ago that I was single. I'm aware time is running down, but I want to be sure to cover those things that you want to talk about.
Okay.
While you have the floor.
Okay. Well, the thing that is most important to me is remembering murder victims. This is probably where my passion really lies.
Why is that? Remembering murder victims. That's unique.
I feel a very strong connection with murder victims. And it's because my friend was murdered, it's because I've known people who've been affected by this, and I know the devastating effect that murder has on families and on communities. And I think that it's very important for us to remember. My Slabtown chronology, where I've been collecting Portland murders now for 20 years, has about 2,700 incidents. Some of them are multiple victims, most of them are single victims. And they're not all Portland, because I collect murders from Vancouver, occasionally from outlying areas, Forest Grove, it's kind of an interesting place. So it's the metro area. But I don't even know why it's so important to me, but it is very important to me that we remember murder victims. Mm-hmm. Murder can happen to anybody. In fact, if you don't mind, I'd like to read just a little
Please do.
Of the introduction here, because
Have we shown this yet to the cameras?
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
This is my first book for History Press, Murder and Mayhem in Portland. And what I was trying to do was tell the history of the city in murders. So I picked, I think it's about 12 or 13 murders, and each of them in a different time period, and each of them illustrates a different aspect of Portland's history. So let me just read a little of the introduction here. Every neighborhood of a city is haunted by the ghost of the victims of violent crimes. In my neighborhood, on a daily basis, I walk past the tavern where a taxi driver picked up his last fare before being killed for the cash he had collected that night. I walk past several apartment buildings where women, from Gwen Ponson in 1942 to Nikayla Powell in 2012, have been killed by lovers or other strangers. I walk past the dumpster where the body of a 7-year-old boy was found 30 years ago, and the bowling alley where an employee was shot to death on my last birthday. My neighborhood is not more violent than any of the other neighborhoods in Portland or any other American city, but it is haunted by countless murder victims. It is probably the most common experience among city dwellers to know about a murder in the neighborhood or to know someone who has been murdered. No one is immune. Homicide and other violent crimes happen to everyone, regardless of gender, ethnicity, occupation, wealth, or its lack, or any other category. A homicide can and does happen to anyone at any time. That's why it makes such an interesting study. By looking at who has been killed and who has done the killing, we learn about how people lived and died. Sometimes a murder investigation brings to light things that are not remembered anywhere else. By studying the history of murder in a city, we get a glimpse into the lives of its residents, the things they thought about, and the problems they faced. By looking at the history of a murder investigation, we learn a lot about the relationship between the citizens and the police force. We learn how the police force and the methods its officers use to enforce the law have changed. Ironically, the study of the history of murder can make the history of a city come alive. That's what it's about for me.
Mm-hmm. How about other major cities around the country? Do you find there's something unique about the murders that have occurred in Portland?
Not really.
As compared to other cities?
Not really. We don't have as many murders as other cities.
Yeah.
We're a fairly peaceful town, but that still means about, there's probably 60, 70 people a year. Actually, it's lower than that now. I think we're averaging around 35 a year right now. 60, 70 has been the high. In the 80s, the 90s were very violent times, and a lot of people were killed. But that's part of what appeals to me about Portland is it's not a big town. And it's not a real violent town, although there's a good, strong streak of violence, and you don't want to be in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. No matter what period of history you live in, you can get killed in Portland. But it's a small enough town that you can get a grasp on it. You can get to know some of the personalities. And, you know, I spend a lot of my time right now living between 1916 and 1933, which is the era that my new book is going to cover. And I feel like I really know the people who are involved. You know, the people in government who are corrupt, the people in government who are trying to change things. The ones that interest me a lot are the street criminals, the kids growing up in South Portland at that time who were mostly Jewish and Italian immigrants from immigrant families. No different than the kids growing up in East Portland now. They didn't have any money. They wanted a way to have their American success, and crime was what was available to them. You know, it's as I quote in the book here, organized crime is just capitalism with the mask of respectability removed.
Why is it that you talk about Portland in terms of Portland being weird? What makes Portland weird? We've got about 3 minutes left.
Okay, I love Portland. Portland is my city. I just love it. I love our history. I love our buildings. I love the people who live here. It's not really any weirder than other cities, don't tell anyone. But there are a lot of odd things that have happened here. A lot of odd people, odd and interesting. One of my favorite characters, and he was the one that I used to open Weird Portland, he's the very first blog post there, is a man named Julius Caesar. And he was born a slave, brought by his family, his master family, to Corvallis when he was about 15 years old. He stayed with them. They freed him before they came, but he stayed with them because he was a kid. He didn't have any place else to go. Didn't have any other family. So he came with them, and then he lived a very roving life. He was a porter on steamships between San Francisco and Portland, and he settled down in Portland. But what he loved was oratory. He loved to give speeches and to quote from Shakespeare. And so toward the end of his life, he wasn't all that old. He said that he was in his 70s, but he was actually really in his 50s. But he became kind of a street person. He was an alcoholic at the time. And at one point he decided he wasn't going to work anymore. He decided working was a scam. And he was going to live by his wits from that point. And he hung out down at Schiller's cigar store and cadged cigars and drinks from the bettors there. And he got a lot of cigars and drinks because he could give these very flowery, ornate speeches. He was a big speaker for the Republican Party in the 1880s and 1890s because at that time they were courting the black vote in Portland, so they needed black orators. Portland's got a long history of black orators anyway. We've had some great ones. But Julius Caesar, one of my favorites. And the thing that I loved about him, the thing that makes him weird, is he liked to sneak up behind people on the sidewalk, usually a well-dressed young couple, and without them knowing he was there, he would yell, "Play ball!" and frighten them. But that was his favorite joke. He was a jokester. And so when he died, he didn't have any money. He was pretty much a street person at that point, but his friends from the cigar store took up a collection and they bought him a headstone. It's out at loan for now, and on the top of it says, "Play ball." Those are the weird stories that I love about Portland. And not all that weird, but just weird enough.
Would you be one of those characters that qualify for membership in those that make Portland weird?
I hope so. I definitely hope so.
You enjoy your life.
I do. I wouldn't do it if I didn't.
Yeah. So why don't you look at which camera and say camera 3. And
Camera 3, okay.
Some final message to the viewers in about a minute or so.
Well, thank you for listening, everybody. And I'm going to say what I always say in my podcast: history isn't free. Support your local historian. We do a lot of work, and we work really hard, and it doesn't pay very well. But it is very important work. History needs to be preserved. Support your local historian.
You've been a great guest.
Thank you very much.
And hopefully we'll move beyond this. So a few public service announcements in the control room, please. And to watch my shows on the web, Google Don Baham YouTube. There's hundreds of shows there. My interviews for the last 17 years. And I've interviewed pizza makers, truck drivers, politicians, medical doctors, and a whole range of different characters who are interesting. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, without the ACLU, we'd be in further trouble than we are. We need to protect civil liberties. Go to that website and learn about the ACLU. And we got to end corporate personhood. That Supreme Court decision that said corporations are persons and money is speech. It's destroying this wonderful experiment in democracy of America. And I'm a humanist minister. To learn more about humanists and humanism, go to that website, www.americanhumanists.org. And I got to remind you to remember KFC and not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind. Be friendly and be charitable to you too. And you too. And Mike behind the camera over there in the control room. And you too. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.